Thank you all for staying. How many of you struggle with this community versus academic debate? I think we may have one, two, yeah. Okay, so I will quickly tell you my story. I think Chris did a nice job of saying that academics are fantastic, but a lot of people choose community for a lot of other reasons. And I'll tell you my story, and maybe we won't have the answer to this question. The answer to this question is yes, you can start in the community. The better question is, should you? Okay, so my story, I started at SUNY Downstate, grew up in New York, SUNY Downstate Medical School, so busy, academic, inner city group of patients. Then I went to residency at St. Luke's Bethlehem and had my first kid as an intern and my second kid as a chief resident. And then I went into the community at Doylestown Hospital, which is an affluent, just as it looks, beautiful little suburb outside of Philly. And I joined one of the best private groups. Still to this day, I was the first to leave unless you died or retired. So in terms of community groups, it didn't get better than this. Fabulous faculty, smart, and this job was hard to come by, and this was a fabulous little suburban community job that I had for 8 years. So for 8 years. And then something happened. I had my fourth kid, and I one day decided I wanted to do research. And we were seeing a ton of these patients with new onset atrial fibrillation. I had just read about the Ottawa Aggressive Protocol, and I said, I wonder if we could do this in the community. Get all these people home. We just started electrophysiology had an AFib follow-up center, so I thought this is great. Let's do this. Let's do research in the community. And I got a mentor. So who knows who this is? That's Ian Steele, right, in Ottawa. And I actually called Ian up and I said, Ian, I want to do your Ottawa Aggressive Protocol at Doylestown Hospital. And he was like, who is this? Where are you? And I was like, no, really, we want to do this. Okay, great. So about 2.5 years and 29 versions of the protocol later, lots of banging my head up against a wall because I had no idea what I was doing, number one. Number two, it was really true community hospital where there were 19 private cardiologists who all had a say in what we were doing, right? And then I went to the IRB where they told me it wasn't research because it wasn't a drug company chemotherapeutic agent. And I said, no, it really is research. Hey guys, come in. It really is research, I promise you. And I really need some sort of IRB stamp. You can even just say it's exempt for all I care. So they had this big meeting about whether or not it was even research. So eventually we started. And then I had no idea. I had my nurses and faculty members enrolling patients. It was a prospective observational trial. And they had to put things in a lockbox because, right, it's like not HIPAA compliant. We had actual paper. But lo and behold, 2 years later, we published a paper. And now this is all Doylestown is doing and the surrounding community hospitals around Doylestown. Everyone, not everyone, but lots of patients with new onset atrial fibrillation go home. So what did I learn from that experience? Well, I learned a couple of things. One is I learned research is very difficult to do in the community. And two, I started to get a little lonely. I think that's what Chris said. I said, I'm interested in this, and I have great cases, and I have no learners. And so I got learners. I actually started some EMFP ultrasound fellowship or rotation at Doylestown because a good case isn't a good case. Hey, I would be like, hey, look, this is a great case. And everyone would be like, really? No, you're just kind of slowing workflow down, and there's no good case. And so for me, I started to get a little lonely. And I was attempting research in the community, which turned out to be very, very difficult. So I got a little inkling. This is 8 years out of residency now, that maybe, I needed more of an academic setting. So the question is it possible to go from, there to there? So where's that? So that's the big ear of corn in Rochester, Minnesota. So I actually went to Mayo Clinic in Rochester, Minnesota from Doylestown. Now, why did I do that is a good question. Well, My brother was there, and he's chair of the PICU, and he lived in New York, San Francisco, and Seattle, so I thought, okay, I can live in Minnesota. And they hired me, which is fascinating, right? But I think it was because I said, you know, I am interested in doing all of these things, and I did attempt research, and we did get published, and I did want learners, and I got some of them, as hard as it was, right? My CV was a total of a page and a half, but I had this desire to re-engage in academics, and so we all went to Minnesota. Those are not all of my children, 4 of them are. These are my nieces, which is why we wound up in Minnesota. So here is another reason you go to Minnesota. My kids learned how to ski. This is a double diamond. She's 6 years old. Watch this. There you go. That's what happens when you move to Minnesota. No fear. Look at that. All right. So then I got involved in what's my current area of interest, which is sudden cardiac death in the young, because I had my own brush with sudden cardiac death. I passed out at an exercise class and found out I have congenital long QT syndrome, and 2 of my 4 children do as well. So this is Joseph Brugada of the Brugada brothers and the Brugada family, and I speak Spanish, so I was invited to speak at their family conference, which is, see that in the background, in Barcelona, and tell my story to the family members. So again, the recurrent themes you've heard is it's not necessarily who you are, it might be your life experience, your passion, right, and who you connect with. So moving forward, I am at Mayo thinking that it's a little cold and I'm not a Minnesotan, and so I meet Judd Hollander, who is at Jefferson with Dimitri and myself in Maui, giving a talk that Chris Fox invited me to. Yep. And Judd says, you should come back to the East Coast. And he told my mother this at dinner. So now my mother's saying, oh, really? She could come back to the East Coast and do what she loves? And he's like, yes, I promise you this. Another recurrent theme, he said, I didn't even look at the emergency department because Judd said, I want greatness for you, and I will make it happen, come here. And I said, all right, I can't turn an offer like that down. So we all moved back to the East Coast from Minnesota to Jefferson. The question here this morning, and that's my brief story, is pros and cons of the community. So you've heard my story. It's probably a little bit, again, like Dimitri's, a bit of a meander, a bit of throw yourself out there and see what sticks. But the question we came here to answer is, can you start in the community? Should you start in the community? What are the pros and cons? And here we go. So in the community, intubating this gentleman, you're the only doctor awake in the entire county, right? This is Bucks County, Pennsylvania, very affluent, community, right? I was the only doctor awake in the community, in the entire county. So what goes on in your head? First, it's kind of cool because this is your tube. So when you're in the community, a pro, you don't have to share your procedures. I would do 4 or 5 intubations myself a month. I would take care of very sick children. Clinically, you figure it out. You have no choice, right? You figure it out, and you become very clinically astute because no one else is there with you holding your hand. You have to do it. So you get all your own procedures. So this is kind of going on in your head. This is what's happening. You're the only doctor at night. Okay, you got this. But then the respiratory therapist wants to know what your vent settings are, right? And it's just you, so you answer. Now, but the family wants an update because they're really upset, and it's still just you. Remember, you're the only doctor working overnight. Now, this is not every community hospital. I'm painting the truest, purest community hospital experience. Oh, and doctor, did you get a chance to look at the chest x-ray, where the tube is? Oh, sure. Oh, and guess what? We just got a stroke alert. Remember, only doctor. Now your patient's waking up, needs some sedation, and the ICU is full. So now you need to transfer this patient to another hospital. And I'm not exaggerating this. Oftentimes in the community, you stay until your work is done. You sign out at 4, you leave the door at 6:30 because you don't have go-betweens. You don't have learners, right? So yes, you get the tube. It's exhilarating. It's awesome. You take care of your own patient, but then you do all the rest of this stuff. This is academic. Same intubation. Your intern's at the head of the bed, and you're like, oh, okay, maybe this isn't going to go well, but you're just your job is to tell him that it's okay. The sats are still 100%. You know, don't look. You've got plenty of time. What do you see? What do you see? What do you see, right? And then, you know, he's right main stem, but we can all fix that. The respiratory therapist can fix it. I'm not even sure I hear about that because he ordered the chest x-ray, looked at the chest x-ray, did the vent settings. 32's having a stroke. My senior's in there, right? The ICU takes him, and I just write some note kind of at some point in my shift. That's the difference clinically. I'm not painting a negative picture. I'm telling you what happens, which is why you grow up as a doctor clinically in the community. So the cons, we went through this nearing the end here. You may be all alone. Sometimes there is single coverage, particularly at night. And if you're not close to if you don't have neurosurgery in-house, pediatrics in-house, right, or trauma, you can't send someone who's unstable. And that was my slide earlier. All that matters is how far you are from ECMO, right? You're by yourself. You have to figure it out. And you have to transfer a patient that is unstable or kind of do your best to deal with them without resources. So you can be alone. You're doing all of the annoying details in that, you know, so-and-so needs a work note. Okay, 1 second, right? So-and-so needs a splint. Okay, I'll be right in. And now, you know, in the in academics, you do have that buffer where you can say, hey, can you just get that one a work note, or go see what's going on in terms of pain control, right? And my best cases, right, again, it's not that no one cared, but they were sort of like, really, you were just in that room for like 45 minutes? Could you come out here and help us, right? And I had a fabulous group at Doylestown, but it's work. You have to work, right? And then one bad case. So I think because your clinical work is mostly your whole career, you have a bad case, and it doesn't matter what kind of bad case, it really affects you. And a lot of my community friends, my colleagues, you know, going through 1 or 2 or 3 lawsuits, as we all will in our career, you know, that's the beginning and the end. Whereas in academics, I think we can say, all right, a paper just, you know, got accepted, that's good, or, you know, something else happened where it's not just 100% clinical. And the belonging is hard, right? I felt like I belonged with my group, but it was harder to belong because you didn't have those non-academic days where you have lunches and journal clubs and, you know, resident lectures. It was you go to your job, and then the second you're done, people are walking out the door, and that's just sort of the culture. So the cons of academic medicine, we've heard all morning. There's just not enough time in the day. It is sort of a you know, 1-to-1 in terms of protected time or buy down time is a lie. It's, you know, 5 or 6 to 1. However, your 1 hour of saving, you know, working on a critically ill child that you can't transfer to another facility versus your 5 hours of journal club, you know, they're not equivalent, but perhaps they're different, right? You do always have imposter syndrome. I think we're all saying very similar things. You're given tasks for which you may say yes, and then you want to do more, you want to learn more, you want to get another degree, or you want to say, no, I'm not good enough, like pretty much every day, all the time. There is some academic pressure to publish, mostly because your salary rank is tied to your academic rank in a lot of academic places, and you want to climb up the ladder for a lot of reasons, and it's hard writing papers and getting them published. While conferences are awesome and traveling is awesome, you are away from your family, both travel days and while you're there, so it makes it a little more complicated. And the less money thing, you know, that's up for debate because time is money. But objectively, I would say a lot of the reasons I hear people going into the community from residency is that they're A, burned out from clinical medicine, but remember, that's what we just talked about, but B, they want to make more money, Be careful with that because sometimes there's a buy-in. You know, my group had a 3-year buy-in to partner. During those 3 years, you don't make more. They sometimes have interesting bonus and salary structures where it's tied to your productivity, which can be a very stressful clinical environment for a new graduate. Now, I'm not saying this is universal. And also, if you're a private group, which we were, it was harder to do mass benefits, so we were kind of cheap on that end. We decided it ourselves, so the benefits weren't, you know, as robust. Just to give you the realistic picture, because I think that's why you're all still sitting here. So can you, the question is, can you start in the community and go to academics? The answer is yes. I'm standing here, yes. It's not easy. The imposter syndrome is really hard if you do that, most certainly. You have a lot of catch-up time from your younger colleagues that have been doing a lot of academic things for the last, you know, I'm 10 years out of residency, right? So what you need to do is somehow teach, you know, your portfolio that Dimitri was talking about earlier, your education portfolio, try and make that robust. This is while you're in the community, right? Get a mentor. So if you don't know if you saw the themes, I had Ian Steele out of you know, from afar, and then Judd, and make sure your CV is growing. Doing things you love, doing things you care about, though. Life isn't about your CV, it's life. So do the things you want to do. And then, you know, really this whole finding your area of interest, and we've heard about that a lot. If you can do that somehow while you're in the community, for me, it was easy. I have an inherited channelopathy. Not everybody has, you know, something that they have like this that can define their career passion and path. But if you could find that intersection of, you know, we've seen that Venn diagram a bunch, your one thing where it's your passion, your skill set, and an unmet need. An unmet need. I think that that's probably the thing that would sell it. So I'll leave you with what to decide. Very sort of big picture overview. My story, which may be unique, that would be my disclaimer. But I think that you can start in the community and or stay there and have a very successful academic career. And I think we don't give our community colleagues enough kudos. Their clinical strengths are phenomenal, really unparalleled. I want them taking care of me and my family members, in all honesty. All right, that's it.